Sadhguru is a yogi and spiritual teacher who appears to be gaining popularity on TikTok recently, but some of his newer followers might not be aware of his suspicious past. Let's investigate. If you enjoy internet mysteries, conspiracies, and true crime, feel free to subscribe and turn on notifications for more content like this. I also have a Patreon and a PayPal, so if you're interested in supporting the channel, feel free to check those out, links will be in the description. Jagadish Vasudev, more commonly known as Sadhguru, but we'll call him Jag, is an Indian yogi, author, and founder of Isha Foundation. Jag, born on the 3rd of September 1957, began practicing yoga daily from the age of 13, though wasn't a particularly spiritual person until 12 years later when he sat on a rock and had a spiritual experience. After travelling for a year, he decided to start teaching yoga. In 1984, he met Vijaykumari, or Vijay for short, after a yoga class. They soon got married and had a daughter, Radhi, in 1990. 2 years later, Jag established the Isha Foundation, a non-profit spiritual organisation which offers yoga programs and activities relating to spirituality, education and the environment, run by 9 million volunteers. After he began conducting classes in America in 1998, he's since grown in popularity over the years and is now a popular figure in spiritual communities around the world. He has 5.5 million followers on Instagram and 1.6 million on TikTok. I don't know if he's blowing up recently or if I'm just getting recommended his videos for some reason, but in the last few days I've seen 2 of his TikToks and another one from one of his followers, when I've never noticed any before. I was actually going to do a video on all this a while back, but it kind of slipped my mind and I didn't realise he was on TikTok until recently. Some of his TikToks are clips of the seminars he does, but others are just random clips of him doing something and trying to be deep. In this one, he's chopping a radish and just goes on a massive tangent about not knowing if your food is from the land or the lab, and then...
When we want a disaster, we get over smart with life. Wrong thing to do. Always understand, the smartest thing out here is creation.
What is he even talking about and how did we get here?
The smartest thing out here is life itself. You just learn to live, you just learn to be part of it, you just enjoy being life. Don't try to be smarter than life.
I wonder if he's always just trying to think of profound things to say, but when it comes to it, he says a lot without really saying anything. In terms of his teachings, there's a focus on yoga and meditation, and in addition to the standard law of attraction and creating your own reality beliefs, he has a number of controversial beliefs. He promotes the bizarre and unfounded claim that eating cooked food during a lunar eclipse depletes the body's pranic energy. He has no credentials that would qualify him to teach on mental illness, yet he has made various unproven comments about depression, such as that it is caused by too much eating and not enough physical activity. Having a good diet and exercising can improve the symptoms of depression, but it's not really accurate to say that those things are a direct cause, when often they are effects of depression, if anything. He doesn't seem to understand that depression is a literal medical condition, and he equates it with feeling anger or fear, which tend to be temporary emotions. Other pseudoscientific and outlandish teachings he promotes include using mercury in medicine, the theory of water memory, the idea that Hindu tantrics have the power to raise people from the dead, and he also opposes Darwin's scientific discoveries. Despite the controversies, Jag has done some positive things through the Isha Foundation. There are initiatives dedicated to education in rural India, where around 3,000 students are taught, and also efforts to raise the welfare of underprivileged communities. Isha also focuses on environmental issues and has consultative status with the UN Economic and Social Council, and it's an accredited observer of the UN Convention to Combat Desertification. It established Project Green Hands in 2004, which centres around tree planting, and Rally for Rivers in 2017, which focuses on cleaning up India's depleting rivers by growing forests alongside them. However, this campaign attracted criticism from environmentalists due to it lacking scientific basis. There were also questions about what all the money collected had been spent on, with some people believing it was all just a scam. Even if they did what they were supposed to with the money, it sounds likely that this campaign was more of a publicity stunt than a selfless movement. This is only one of many criticisms against Isha, which was actually built illegally. The headquarters, located in the Veliangiri Mountains, is comprised of a 150-acre campus of 77 structures, including the Ishi Ashram, which sounds like the main building. Human activity is restricted in the area to preserve wildlife and ecology, though that didn't stop Jag building his foundation in this area without the necessary permission. They did apply for approval in 2011, but this was after they had already illegally erected buildings, walls and electric fences. It was found that the compound wall of the ashram and front gate were built from the forest land, and the structures, as well as significantly higher numbers of visitors to the ashram, had obstructed the elephant corridor. As a result, elephants were forced to take a different route, which resulted in destroyed crops and villagers being attacked. In December 2012, after Isha ignored orders for them to stop all construction, they were told to demolish all illegal structures within a month. They challenged this, and to my knowledge, those structures are still there to this day. People have tried to take legal action over the years, and at one point Isha was told to ensure big functions at the ashram didn't cause pollution, but that's about as far as it went, which I think is really suspicious. Obviously there's no evidence of anyone being bribed or of any corruption within the relevant authorities, but how is Isha getting away with breaking the law? According to News Laundry, Isha, which is registered in America, evades taxes by passing off a considerable chunk of its income as donations. Isha is classed as a public charitable trust and is therefore exempt from paying taxes on donations under the income tax. The foundation reportedly classes the cost of yoga classes and retreats as donations, yet the fee is mandatory. You can't just go for free and donate if you feel like it. The retreats aren't cheap either. A luxury 13-day trip to Kailash Mansarovar with Jag can cost up to nearly £50,000 per person. Various people have reported purchasing products or services, including saplings and yoga programs, and receiving a receipt stating that the fee was a donation and was therefore exempt from taxes. In 2014, Achimuthu Shankar signed up for a week-long yoga course and was told that he couldn't join until he paid a fee, which he received a donation receipt for. To qualify for exemption under the Income Tax Act, a donation has to be voluntary, and transactions of this kind are not. Another condition is that the organisation must have nothing to do with religious or business activities, and Isha is involved in both. Again, it makes you wonder if there's corruption going on somewhere. This information is publicly accessible, so why are they being enabled to continue breaking the law? Already we can see that Jag and his foundation are morally questionable, but we're yet to cover the most suspicious incident. Jag and Vijay got married in 1984 when he was 27 and she was 21. As you know by the title of this video, years later Vijay would die under mysterious circumstances. There are varying reports on the specific circumstances of her death. Some sources state that when she died, Vijay was meditating with a small group of people. Some say there were hundreds of witnesses, and others say that she was in a room that only Jag was permitted to enter, while the other so-called witnesses were outside. The only common detail between these reports is that Vijay seemed to just drop dead, with no apparent cause. I'm not sure where the variations of the story came from, but the police report states that around 5:45 p.m. on the 23rd of January 1996, Vijay was meditating with 13 other people when she fainted and fell on a witness. A doctor was staying at the yoga centre at the time, and he rushed over to examine Vijay as she took her last breath. According to the doctor, there were no visible injuries on her body, and he determined the cause of her death was myocardial infarction or a heart attack. Since her death, Jag, his followers and other associates of Ishi Foundation have maintained that Vijay attained Mahasamadhi, which is defined as the state a yogi enters when they consciously make the decision to leave their body. As a skeptic of spiritual ideas of that nature, that was a pretty big red flag for me. Alone, it doesn't prove that there was anything suspicious about her death, but I don't buy that she just decided to die, then died. According to Yogapedia, Mahasamadhi is only possible once someone has achieved God realization, in which the yogi recognizes and experiences their true oneness and unity with God. A yogi who has attained this is said to already dwell in a permanently enlightened state, which gives them the potential to enter Mahasamadhi. It's a different experience to the death that happens for unenlightened beings, and in making the decision to release their mortal body, the yogi also extinguishes their karma, thus ceasing the cycle of death and rebirth. Mahasamadhi is seen as the ultimate goal of any spiritual seeker. This is because any state of enlightenment that occurs while the yogi is in the physical realm is still limited by their physical body. I can't be the only one who thinks this sounds very culty. It's a concept that Jag promotes and teaches his followers to work towards, and in basic terms, it's taking one's own life. Jag's website claims that Mahasamadhi is not the same as suicide because it's not done to end suffering. Quote, "To seek Mahasamadhi means to see how to evolve life to another dimension. To seek Mahasamadhi means you have fallen so deeply in love with life, now you want to know the root of it. You have experienced life in its full depth, now you want to know the dimensions of life." I'm trying to remain somewhat open-minded, but that right there is some drink the Kool-Aid level craziness. I don't think it would be a massive stretch to call Jag a cult leader. He checks many of the boxes. In addition to promoting a way to take your own life, he is seen by his followers as a god-man of sorts, and he clearly sees himself as of an elevated status, as he titled himself Sadhguru, which means real or true guru. His followers seem to have total blind faith in him. I've seen posts and articles criticising him where the comments have just been filled with angry followers, and someone who made a video on Jag claimed to have received death threats. As with many teachers of the law of attraction, questioning and doubt is discouraged, and followers are taught a new way to think and act. There is an us versus them mentality, with followers believing that they're transcending above everyone else. I'm not totally dismissing the charity work Isha does, but there's clearly a focus on turning a profit, which is usually the case in cults. I could go on, but I think you get the idea. I'm not saying this is definitely a cult, but it certainly shares some characteristics. Anyway, I digress. Back to Mahasamadhi. Throughout history, there have been a few figures in Hindu and yogi communities who have supposedly chosen to leave their bodies. One being Lahiri Mahasaya, who died on the 26th of September 1895. In the time prior to his death, he told some of his disciples that he'd soon be leaving his body. On the day, he reportedly said, "I am going home, be comforted, I shall rise again," then turned his body around 3 times, faced north, and died. A lesser mentioned but vital detail is that a couple of months before his death, Lahiri developed a small boil on his back. It sounds like it got progressively worse, and eventually his disciples insisted that he have it lanced, though it's unclear whether he actually did. Either way, that could well have been the cause of his death. Another example is Paramahansa Yogananda, who was giving a speech at the Biltmore Hotel in Los Angeles to welcome India's visiting ambassador on the 7th of March 1952. In the days prior, he hinted to his disciples that it was time for him to leave his body, and so he did on that day, right after he finished his speech. His body didn't decay for 3 weeks, a fact that's quoted by proponents as proof that Paramahansa must have been mystical. But when you read a bit further into it, it's really not that mysterious at all. The timing of his death is a bit of a coincidence, if he really was telling his followers that he was going to leave his body, but coincidences happen, and at the time, his health was reportedly deteriorating. I couldn't find anything to confirm he actually had an illness, but the last 4 years of his life were spent mostly in seclusion, with a small inner circle of his disciples. In that time, he rarely did any interviews or public lectures, and I wonder if that was because he knew his health was deteriorating, and he didn't want his followers to know because it would refute his rejuvenation practices. His official cause of death was a heart attack, which is ironic considering he claimed one of his yoga techniques could rest the heart and therefore increase longevity, yet he was 59 when he died. As for his body not decaying for 3 weeks, people neglect to mention that it had been embalmed the day after he died, so that's not unusual at all. In the vast majority of these supposed cases of Mahasamadhi, the truth is much less mysterious than the stories people tell. Many of the yogis who attained it were actually in poor health anyway, and the deaths weren't unexplainable. As for them seemingly predicting their own deaths, if someone knows they're ill and deteriorating, it's not a wild prediction that they might die soon. And we're only really taking their followers' word for it that they did say it would happen, which is probably not the most reliable source. As for Vijay, we have no idea if she was suffering with a serious illness or what exactly caused her death, because Jag had her cremated at 6 AM the next morning against her father's wishes. After being informed that his daughter had died, Gangana called Isha twice, requesting them not to move the body. They just totally ignored him and cremated Vijay before he had time to get there and before an autopsy could be performed. So we don't know if she died of natural causes, of a preventable condition, a terminal illness, an overdose or poison. All we have to go off is the opinion of the doctor who examined her as she died, who claims she had a heart attack. I'm a bit wary of this doctor though. The fact that he was staying at the ashram suggests that he probably has spiritual beliefs, and most beliefs of that nature aren't particularly scientific. If he believes in Mahasamadhi, which there is no empirical evidence for, and he's a follower of Jag, that could prevent him from being unbiased in his examination. Regardless, he never actually said he believed she consciously chose to leave her own body, and listed possible causes of the heart attack as stress and strain, a snake bite, an accident, or heart disease. Though he somehow ruled out poisoning, suicide, and homicide. If he couldn't rule out a snake bite, which would be quite apparent, how could he rule out poisoning? Gangana was actually the one to file the police report 6 months after Vijay's death, alleging that Jag may have been responsible. He recalled how she regularly complained to him and her mother about Jag's affairs with other women. He also claimed that she was once brought to their home unconscious, and that when they asked her about it later, she said she was forcibly being given sleeping pills. I'm not sure if these incidents were reported at the time, but police never investigated them then or since Vijay's death. According to their disciples, Vijay chose her day to die and had spoken about it in the days prior, but just like with the other yogis who supposedly chose to leave their bodies, we only have their word for that, and depending on her state of health running up to her death, it may not have been that unpredictable. Around 45 inmates were questioned by police, all of whom said that Vijay and Jag lived a normal and happy life. On the day of her death, she behaved normally and no one noticed any health issues. I don't want to totally dismiss that, but they may not be the most credible witnesses, not necessarily because they'd all knowingly lie, but being in an environment like that has potential to make you more suggestible and only see what you want to see. Regardless, if Vijay was murdered, in which case the most likely method would be poisoning, there's not necessarily any reason why she would be acting differently to normal if she wasn't aware of what was about to happen. After the police report was filed, they obtained a portion of bones and ashes and sent them for forensic testing. No traces of poison were found, though only metal-based medications, drugs or poisons can survive the cremation process, so this finding didn't remove the possibility of poison being the cause of death. If Jag did murder Vijay, there are a couple of possible motives, one being to clear the path for him to be with one of the women he apparently had an affair with. Another could also be to make his teachings seem more credible. They're coming from a man whose wife reached the highest level of enlightenment, not just your average Joe. But there's no evidence to prove either of these possibilities. The fact of the matter is, there's no solid evidence at all to suggest that Jag murdered his wife, and police were unable to convict him of anything. Whether or not he's guilty, he destroyed the only piece of evidence that could have proven one way or the other, and that's not the only suspicious detail in this case. Not having enough evidence to pursue a conviction doesn't equate to proving someone's innocence, but there is also a chance that Vijay died of natural causes. If the doctor was right and she did have a heart attack, sometimes that can just happen. There isn't always necessarily a direct cause. Or she could have had a stroke or a brain aneurysm or one of many other possibilities. It's impossible to say without an autopsy. The only thing I'm fairly certain of is that Vijay did not consciously die with no direct cause. There is a chance that she somehow took her own life, maybe using poison, but either way, there's no evidence to support the idea that you can simply choose to leave your own body. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Vijay was murdered, or do you have a different theory? If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing. Huge thank you to my patrons, whose names are on screen now. I really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on Thursday for a new video.